Hello, I'm Michael Lesh. I'm the founder and CEO of Syntegra.io. We are a seed-stage company that was spun out of UCSF in the beginning of this year. We know that gaining access to high-quality medical data is a huge challenge, and it's important because for AI and machine learning to accelerate innovation for researchers at biopharma, the insurance companies, and health systems, they need access to vast quantities of so-called big data in the form of electronic health records, genomics, wearables, sensors, financial information, etc. But because privacy concerns, which are appropriate, and strict regulation around those concerns, such as the HIPAA laws, this data is locked in silos throughout the healthcare system. There are de-identification methods, which are many years old, and they're easily reversed with modern attacks and therefore no longer trustworthy. So what we've done at Syntegra is developed a novel solution in which we create synthetic derivatives or synthetic data from real-world data. And we, to do that, have to have a number of criteria that has to be privacy preserving. That is to say, the synthetic data cannot be reverse engineered to discover who the data came from initially. There's got to be validated precision. That is to say, the statistical properties of the synthetic data must match the properties of the real data in any way you care to measure it. And the model has to be explainable. We have to be able to go to the FDA and say, this is how the synthetic data was created. This slide shows the model itself. We start on the left with patient journeys, and by that we mean think of a patient as a series of events over time. They could have been admitted to the hospital, they were given a drug, they had a blood test or something, etc. And you have a whole data set of patient journeys. We then train a very large neural network in what we call pattern encoding. So we're looking at the high resolution covariance between all the variables in the real data set. And what we wind up with is a trained pattern encoder, which has within it the high resolution patterns that exist in the entire original data set. We then use a random number generator, which is essentially sampling from this high dimensional probability distribution. And from that, we create synthetic real world data. It looks like the original patient data, but it contains none of it, and therefore re-identification cannot take place. We're working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who have a COVID therapeutic accelerator, and we're helping them aggregate COVID data from around the world, create synthetic versions of that COVID data, which then allows researchers to get immediate access to the data in order to do research on COVID. We're also working with the NIH and something called the N3C, another very large COVID initiative. We're working with the FDA. We have a number of research studies with UCSF, Montefiore, Tufts, etc. This is an example of the kind of a study that we've done. This is electronic medical record from a data set called Mimic, and we had access to 50,000 admissions. And we created a synthetic data set using that data set as the real data. And what we can see here, just initially from a validation standpoint, is the match of real and synthetic data. We see the age, ethnicity, gender, etc., with a very, very tight correlation on the univariate distribution. A little bit more challenging is a bivariate distribution, and here we see the pairwise correlation between all the variables in the data set. On the left is the real, on the right is the synthetic, and the correlations are what they are, but the important point is that the correlation on the real data set is exactly matched by the bivariate correlation in the synthetic data set. And lastly, we're able to take the synthetic data and create predictive machine learning models, in this case using gradient boosted trees. We can create a predictive model with the real data, and we create a model with the synthetic data. And when we feed it a test set, we get exactly the same receiver operator curves, meaning that if you wanted to do state-of-the-art machine learning, you could hand someone the synthetic data set and do just as well as if you had the real data set. We have another number of engagements in our current pipeline with Duke. We have discussions ongoing with Novartis to try to free up their clinical trial data for internal use. The Blue Cross Blue Shield, their data science arm, etc. This is Syntegra's financial status. We closed a $3.1 million seed financing in the beginning of this year. We also got an investment from Sweat Equity Ventures in the form of staffing, and we've been able to put together a very successful both go-to-market and tech team with their help. We believe our runway will last until the end of 2021. You can see our cash balance over to the right. So in 2021, we plan on closing several SaaS deals with multiple life science customers. We will also secure partnerships with large healthcare systems to get access to their medical records in order to populate our data marketplace with synthetic versions of that data. We continue to improve our technology to be able to acquire larger and more complex data sets and to automate multi-platform containerized deployment. We have a number of validation proof points that will be published or in press in academic publications. And we're also doing a variety of work in the public sector with FDA and the NIH to receive their endorsement for use of the synthetic data set in regulatory matters. And we plan on closing our Series A in the later half of 2021. I want to thank you for your attention. Happy to take any questions.